My wife's sister called me on a Tuesday afternoon at 2:17 p.m. I know the exact time because I was in a meeting and I stepped out to take it, thinking it was something about the holidays. What she said in the next 4 minutes didn't just change my week. It rewrote the last 6 years of my life. And the worst part, the part I still think about, is that she apologized for waiting so long. My name is Daniel Mercer. I am 44 years old. I work in project management for a mid-size construction firm in Columbus, Ohio. I have been doing this work for 18 years, and I am good at it. I am the kind of person who reads contracts carefully, who checks timelines twice, who asks the questions other people find tedious because I understand that the details are where things go wrong. I say this not to impress you, but because what I'm about to tell you is the story of how a man who reads contracts carefully, who checks things twice, who asks questions, completely missed what was happening inside his own home for 6 years. My wife's name is Carolyn. We met in 2016 at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. She was 31 at the time. Dark hair, quick laugh, the kind of person who remembers what you told her 3 weeks ago and asks about it. We dated for 14 months and got married in September 2017 in a small ceremony in Yellow Springs. 40 people. Her parents, her sister Meg, my parents, close friends. It was a good day. I remember thinking during the reception that I had made a decision I would never regret. I want to be specific about what our marriage looked like from the outside, because from the outside it looked like a good one. We had a house in Clintonville, 3 bedrooms, a yard that needed work every spring, a kitchen we had renovated in 2020 during the lockdown when we had nothing else to do. Carolyn worked as a marketing director for a healthcare company downtown. Good salary, good benefits, flexible hours. I traveled occasionally for work, site visits, client meetings, never more than 3 or 4 days at a stretch. We did not have children. That had been a conversation we had revisited several times over the years without resolution. Carolyn was not sure she wanted them. I thought I did, but told myself there was still time. We kept not deciding, and time kept moving. On the surface, dinner parties, weekend trips, a shared streaming queue, the ordinary texture of a shared life. Everything was fine. Better than fine in the ways that are easy to measure. What I could not measure, what I had been measuring wrong for 6 years, was what was happening underneath. I want to walk you through the things I noticed and chose not to press, because I think that honesty matters. I was not completely blind. I am not that kind of person. I noticed things. I just told myself stories about them that were easier to live with than the truth. Carolyn started working later in 2020. This made sense during the pandemic. Her company was struggling. She was carrying more responsibility. The hours were brutal. For everyone in healthcare-adjacent industries. I did not question it. By 2021, the late nights had become routine even after her company stabilized. She was building something, she said, a new division, reporting directly to the VP of Strategy. I was proud of her. I told people at parties that my wife was one of the hardest working people I knew, and I meant it. Her phone became private in a way it had not been before. Not dramatically private. She did not sleep with it face down or leave the room to take calls. It was subtler than that. The phone was simply always near her. Always in her hand or her pocket or on the nightstand screen down. I had never been the kind of husband who checked his wife's phone. I was not about to start. She traveled more. Marketing conferences, she said. Brand strategy summits. A quarterly planning retreat in Chicago that became semi-annual. I drove her to the airport twice in 2022 and picked her up both times. I waved her off and came home to an empty house and cooked for one and watched television and went to bed and thought nothing of it. There were small withdrawals from our joint account that I noticed in the way you notice something that does not quite fit but cannot explain. Not large amounts, $40 here, $60 there. Cash withdrawals at ATMs near her office. I am an organized person. I reviewed our statements monthly. I saw these withdrawals. I told myself she was buying lunch, buying coffee, buying whatever people buy at ATMs near offices. I did not ask. I think now about the version of me that did not ask, and I understand him. He was a man in a good marriage who did not want to be the kind of husband who asks his wife to account for $60 in cash. He was wrong not to ask. But I understand him. The last thing I noticed, the one that sat with me the longest before I explained it away, was a name. Ryan. Carolyn mentioned him twice in 2022. Once in passing, Ryan from work thinks we should rebrand the whole campaign. Once in a story about a company happy hour, Ryan was there. He's hilarious. You'd like him. I did not ask who Ryan was beyond those conversations. Carolyn did not offer more. Ryan stopped being mentioned by name after that, and became a silence that I did not know was a silence. I need to tell you about Meg before I tell you what she said. Because Meg matters in this story not just as the person who called me, but as someone I had watched for 6 years make a choice every week that I did not fully understand until after the phone call. Carolyn's sister Meg is 2 years younger than Carolyn. She lives in Cincinnati with her husband Paul and their 2 daughters. She is a quieter person than Carolyn, more deliberate, less quick to speak. I had always liked Meg. At family gatherings, she was the one who sat with the quieter people at the table, who asked the follow-up question, who remembered things. At our wedding, she had given a toast that made 4 people cry, including me, and she had not seemed surprised by that at all. Meg and I had a friendly but not close relationship. We texted occasionally when birthdays approached. We sat next to each other at Thanksgiving and talked easily. But she had never called me directly, not once in 6 years of marriage. So when her name appeared on my phone at 2:17 on a Tuesday afternoon in November, I felt a small drop of something in my stomach that I could not name. Not alarm exactly, more like the particular feeling of something slightly out of place. I stepped out of the meeting, walked to the stairwell, answered. Daniel. Her voice was steady, but I could hear something underneath it. Something held carefully in place. I need to tell you something. I have needed to tell you for a long time, and I am sorry that it has taken me this long. I need you to listen, and I need you to not call Carolyn until I have finished. I said okay. She talked for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I know because I checked my call log afterward several times, unable to believe that 4 minutes and 12 seconds could contain that much. Carolyn had been having an affair for 3 years. The man's name was Ryan Callahan. He was the VP of strategy at her company. He was 48 years old, and he was married with 3 children in Bexley. Carolyn and Ryan had met at a company retreat in late 2020, and the affair had begun shortly after. Meg had found out 14 months earlier when she had come to Columbus for a visit, and Carolyn had told her. Told her, Meg said, not to confess, not to ask for advice about ending it, but to have someone to talk to who was not Ryan. She had asked Meg to keep it between them. Meg had. For 14 months, she had sat with this. She had gone to our Thanksgiving, our Christmas, our shared birthday dinners, and she had sat across from me and kept it. Why now? I asked. My voice was very calm. I could hear myself from somewhere slightly outside my body. Because last week she told me she loves him, that she is thinking about leaving you. And I decided that if my sister was not going to tell you the truth, someone had to. She apologized again before she hung up, not for telling me, for waiting. I stood in the stairwell for a while. The building around me made its ordinary sounds, heating vents, a door closing 2 floors up, someone's voice in a corridor. Then I went back to the meeting. I do not know why I went back to the meeting. I sat there for 40 more minutes and looked at a project timeline on a screen and said 2 things that made enough sense that no one asked if I was all right. I drove home on autopilot. Carolyn's car was in the driveway. She was home before me, which happened occasionally when her schedule allowed. I sat in my car in the driveway for about 5 minutes, not processing exactly, more like locating myself, finding the edges of what was real. I went inside. She was in the kitchen making dinner, something with pasta. The radio was on, a station she liked. She turned when I came in and smiled. Hey, you're home. Rough day? I said no. Just tired. I set my bag down. I washed my hands at the sink, the way I did every evening. I set the table the way I did when she cooked. 2 plates, 2 glasses, folded napkins, the same things I had done hundreds of times in this kitchen. We ate dinner, and I listened to her talk about her day. A difficult client presentation, a colleague who had annoyed her in a meeting, plans for the weekend. She talked the way she always talked, easily, with specific detail, with that quick wit that had made me fall in love with her at a birthday dinner 8 years ago. I said the right things at the right moments. I asked a follow-up question. I laughed once. I have thought a great deal about that dinner, about how complete the performance was on both sides of the table. She did not know what I knew. I did not know everything yet. We sat across from each other and had dinner the way we had had dinner 1,000 times, and it looked like nothing at all from the outside. After dinner, I told her I had some work to catch up on, and I went to my office and I called my older brother, Tom. Tom is 50 and works in finance and is the most practically minded person I know. I told him everything Meg had said. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I don't know yet. I need to understand what I am actually dealing with before I do anything. That's the right instinct. Do you have a lawyer?" "No. You need one before you say anything to her." "Do you have access to your financial accounts?" "Yes. Joint accounts. She has her own accounts too that I don't have access to. Find out what's in them if you can. Don't move anything yet. Just look. I want to understand something first. Do you think she knows that Meg called?" Tom was quiet. "If Meg called you without telling Carolyn she was going to, then no. Not yet. That gives me time." He paused. "Danny, are you okay?" I thought about it honestly. "I don't know yet. Ask me on Friday." I called a family law attorney on Wednesday morning from my car before I went into the office. Her name was Patricia Voss. Tom had used her firm for a corporate matter years ago and said she was sharp and direct. Both of those things turned out to be accurate. I told her the situation. She asked precise questions. How long married? Joint property? Children? Prenuptial agreement? I answered each one. When I finished, she told me what I needed to know. Ohio is an equitable distribution state. That means marital assets are divided based on what the court considers fair given the circumstances. Adultery is relevant in Ohio divorce proceedings. It can affect settlement terms. She told me to do 4 things before I said anything to Carolyn. First, document everything I knew about the affair, including the call from Meg with date and time and content. Second, review every financial account I had access to and note current balances. Third, do not move any money and do not make any large purchases. Fourth, say nothing to Carolyn that would indicate I knew anything until I was ready to have the full conversation in the right way. I did all 4 things over the next 48 hours while living in my house with my wife and sleeping next to her at night and making coffee in the morning and driving to work. This is the part of the story that people find hardest to understand. "How did you do that?" they ask. "How did you sit across from her and say nothing?" I will tell you how. Because I had spent 18 years in project management learning that the worst thing you can do when something goes wrong on a job is react before you understand the full scope of the problem. You do not start tearing out walls before you know which ones are load-bearing. I needed to know what I was actually dealing with before I said a word. What I found when I reviewed our financial accounts told its own story. Our joint checking account was healthy. Nothing unusual. Our joint savings account had the balance I expected, but I had access to our tax returns. I had filed them jointly every year, and Carolyn's reported income for 2021 and 2022 was lower than I would have expected given her role and the bonuses her company was known to pay. I pulled 2 years of her pay stubs from the filing cabinet, where we kept our household documents. She had always, handled the filing. The cabinet was organized and thorough, and told me immediately that the bonuses that should have appeared in her compensation were not in the joint records. I am a project manager. I understand financial documentation. I knew what I was looking at. Carolyn had a separate account I had no access to. Money had been going into it for at least 2 years. Not a criminal act. People are allowed to have separate finances. But combined with everything else, combined with Ryan, combined with what Meg had said about Carolyn thinking about leaving me, she was not just having an affair. She was building an exit. I asked Carolyn on Thursday evening if we could talk on Friday after work. Just the two of us. I said I had been feeling like we needed to connect, which was true in a way that she could not yet hear fully. She agreed easily. Friday was fine. She would make sure she was home by 6. I spent Friday at work with the particular clarity that comes when a decision has been made and what remains is only the execution. Patricia Voss had given me a framework. I knew what I was going to say. I knew what I was not going to say. I knew what I needed to hear from Carolyn in this conversation to understand what came next. I was home by 5:30. I made tea because doing something with my hands helped. I sat in the living room and waited. She came home at 6:10, dropped her bag by the door the way she always did, came into the living room and saw me sitting there, and stopped. Not alarmed exactly, but her face shifted, just slightly. "You look serious," she said. "I have some things I need to ask you. I want you to be honest with me." She sat down, across from me, not next to me. "I know about Ryan." I said it simply. No accusation in my voice, no anger. Just the fact. She went very still. "I know it has been going on for 3 years. I know he is married. I know you told Meg, and I know you have been thinking about leaving." The color left her face. "Who told you?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "That doesn't matter right now. What matters is that I know, and I need to know from you what you actually want. Because I am not interested in fighting. And I am not interested in being managed. I am interested in the truth." For a long moment she said nothing. Then, and I want to be accurate about this because it matters, she did not lie. She did not try to minimize. She did not say it was nothing, or that it was over, or that she had been meaning to tell me. She said, "I don't know what I want." That honesty, arriving so late, cost me something. And gave me something. I told her I had spoken to an attorney. I told her what I had found in the financial records. I told her that I was not going to make any decisions in this conversation tonight, but that I needed her to understand that I knew the full scope of what had been happening. She asked if I was filing for divorce. I told her I had not decided. She asked if I was going to call Ryan's wife. I told her that was not my first concern. "What is your first concern?" she asked. "Understanding," I said. "How I spent 6 years in a marriage and managed to miss this much." She cried. I did not go to her. I sat where I was and let her cry, and looked at the woman I had married in Yellow Springs on a September afternoon, and I felt grief and anger, and something else I did not have a name for yet. Something that felt almost like relief. Like a thing that had been wrong for a long time had finally been given its right name. Carolyn moved out at the end of November. She stayed with a friend for several weeks before finding an apartment. The house remained with me during the proceedings. The divorce took 8 months. Ryan did not leave his wife for Carolyn. I do not know this from anyone close to the situation. I know it because Carolyn told me herself at one of our mediation sessions when we were discussing the division of assets, and the conversation drifted briefly into territory that it should not have. She said it matter-of-factly, without drama. He chose to stay. She said it without looking at me. Patricia handled the financial side with precision. The documentation I had gathered, the tax returns, the pay stubs, the evidence of the separate account she had been building, was relevant to the equitable distribution discussion. We reached a settlement that Patricia described as fair, given the full picture. I am not going to give you a number because that is not the point of this story. I want to tell you about Meg. I called her the Saturday after my conversation with Carolyn. I had her number still from the original call. I did not know exactly what I was going to say. I knew I needed to say something. She answered, and I could hear that she was outside somewhere. Wind, distant traffic, the sound of her daughters in the background. I just wanted you to know, I said, that you did the right thing. A pause. I should have told you sooner, she said. Yes, I said, you should have. I am sorry, Daniel. For all of it. I know. Thank you for calling. We said goodbye. We have spoken twice since then. Once at Christmas, which was complicated in the way that all restructured family gatherings are. Once when she called to tell me her younger daughter had been accepted into a program she had been working toward. That call was easier. I do not know what Meg's relationship with Carolyn looks like now. I have not asked, and she has not said. Some things belong to other people. It has been 11 months since that Tuesday phone call. I am still in the house in Clintonville. I replanted the yard this spring because the yard needed work, and working in the yard needed doing, and it turned out to be the right kind of activity for a person who is rebuilding something. I am not all the way rebuilt. I want to be honest about that because I think the neat resolution is often a lie people tell to give a story a satisfying shape. The truth is messier and slower. Some mornings I wake up and move through the day with something that feels like genuine forward motion. Other mornings I have coffee alone in the kitchen I renovated during the lockdown, and I look at the work we did together, and I feel the specific weight of something that cannot quite be named. What I have been thinking about most in these 11 months is not Carolyn and not Ryan. It is me, the version of me that noticed things and explained them away. The version who saw the late nights and the private phone and the cash withdrawals and the name that stopped being mentioned and assembled all of it into a story that was comfortable rather than accurate. I am a person who reads contracts carefully, who checks timelines twice, who asks the questions other people find tedious. I did not do any of those things inside my own marriage because I had confused trust with the refusal to look. Those are not the same thing. Trust is something you give someone after they have demonstrated they deserve it. What I was doing was not trust. It was a kind of willful not seeing that I called trust because trust sounds generous and willful not seeing sounds like its own kind of failure. I am not saying I caused what Carolyn did. I am saying I was more interested in the appearance of a good marriage than in the substance of one, and that those two things can coexist for a long time before the distance between them becomes impossible to ignore. I have a therapist I see on Thursdays. He is a calm, measured man who asks questions with exactly enough space after them. He has helped me understand the difference between accountability and self-punishment. They are not the same thing, and it is easy to confuse them when you are the kind of person who is used to solving problems. I am not a problem to be solved. I am a person who went through something and is coming out the other side of it. Meg called on a Tuesday afternoon at 2:17 p.m. and said, I deserved to know something. She was right. She was also right that she should have said it sooner. But I have decided not to spend too much energy on the 14 months she waited because the truth is I am not sure I was ready to hear it before I heard it. Some things land when they are supposed to land, not when we wish they had. I do not know what comes next. That is an uncomfortable thing to say at the end of a story. People prefer the version where the man finds someone new or moves to a different city or starts over in some clean, decisive way. What I have is a replanted yard and a Thursday appointment, and a house that is mine, and the particular hard-won knowledge that I am more resilient than I knew. That is enough for right now. If you have ever had someone in your life hold a truth for too long before telling you, I want to hear about it in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe. There are more.